Welcome back to the MetaMinds podcast. We are here with Avaxa, or Lena, who is a Brisbane-based producer and DJ and also forward thinker. We're going to dive deep on a couple of different topics today, but first we'd like to know a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I started producing maybe 5 years ago, as well as DJing. I kind of got into them both at the same time, but production took me a lot longer to get a good grip on. But in terms of DJing, like, I kind of not fell into it, but just got presented with an opportunity in a time where I was very open to accepting any opportunity, whether it was in creative spheres or any sort of sphere. I was just kind of at a point in my life where I was just ready to accept any opportunity. And so I started DJing at Rick's Bar, which is like this kind of like cult classic sort of bar in Brisbane. I was just playing like indie rock and metal and 70s, 80s, 90s sort of music, and it was for 6 hours every Saturday.
Wow. Like
yeah.
DJing?
Damn. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So like, and it was one of my first gigs, and it was a residency, and I was there for about a year. And so it was like just like an A+ lesson in DJing, because you'd be like dealing with lots of like people coming with the crest, you get lots of drunk people, and just, yeah, people having a riot. And but it would also get to like 4 a.m. where, you might not have that many people on the dance floor anymore, and you'd get to like experiment with, various different things. And it was just a really relaxed vibe. So I could kind of, experiment and really get into what I was doing with DJing. But it was very much a contrast from what I was doing previously, because previously I was in law, I was studying, I was a paralegal, I was writing wills all day. And so upon kind of leaving that world, because I was in it for a while, upon leaving that world, I was just ready to kind of expand my worldview and see what else, what other little jams I could get myself into. And, was previously experimenting with like modeling or video work or just a bunch of kind of creative things to see where things could take me. But yeah,
it's interesting how life can take different turns like that and stuff. And it's funny how when you're talking to someone, you learn something about them that's like completely different to your perception of them in that moment. You're like, wait, what? You used to do that? You know what I mean? But that's kind of how it goes. You have to do one thing before you realize that it's like, wait, I need to do the opposite thing to what I'm doing, So,
yeah.
And I mean, at the time, like, because I'd been more so interested in videos and like making videos for YouTube and things like that. And at the time I was thinking like, oh, well, I need music for videos instead of just going on a website and getting copyright-free music. I'll just make my own. I'll just learn how to make my own music. And then that kind of fostered into what is now my full-time career. So you never know where things will kind of lead.
That also happens to be like an artist life kind of thing, and that you like take just one thing where you're like, oh, I guess I need to do this thing, and then next minute you're like super deep into that thing. You're like, wait, how did I get here? I just took that one kind of opportunity, So
that's interesting. So did you say that you actually started producing to try to supplement your video work, to try to have some sort of music behind it? So that was the initial...
Yeah, I just wanted to make these little videos, and I wanted music behind them, but I didn't have any music, so I was just like, I'll just make my own, and kind of like downloaded Ableton, and I was like, oh, this is hectic. This is really hard.
Big hole list.
But yeah, and it's really evolved from there, from, DJing these like, crappy pop songs in Rick's Bar. Now I play definitely more electronic, melodic house, techno. Sometimes it can be quite experimental, especially when you get into like my live set and, because it's all like original productions, I can get a little quite more experimental as I do there, as opposed to when I DJ, it's, like a lot of more club-oriented tracks, but, doing the performances with, like, a bow double bass player or, like, a flutist or a clarinet player, have, like, bring in musicians, and I'll be up the back with, like, all of my synths and kind of all of my little bits of tech, and kind of just getting into it.
So it's a bit of an interesting story about how you got into this kind of genre of specific music. Can you touch on that a little bit?
In terms of the experimental side, or the melodic house and techno that I DJ and stuff?
Yeah, a bit of all that, like the whole German side of it.
Oh, yeah, so I guess even at the start, when I was, still playing those, like, pop songs at Rick's, I was kind of, like, at the start of my journey through electronic music, because before that, like, in my teenage years, I was, like a punk rocker. I was into, like, metal and folk music and those sorts of things. But I found that some of the energy that I got from both of those, because, the folk side is much lighter and emotional, whereas the punk side is a lot like heavier and has that darker emotion, and I could find the things that I was seeking in both of those genres in electronic music, in techno, kind of aligning itself with the more metal side, and the more like chilled melodic house, those beautiful melodies coming at you in had the same sort of feeling as a lot of the folk music that I was really into when I was younger. So when I was kind of at the beginning of my journey, like moving through electronic music, I was just kind of ready to absorb things from all sides, but I was still very like not critical, but understood like where my tastes were kind of coming from. Like I had very specific tastes, even though I didn't exactly know exactly what I liked yet. I kind of knew the elements that I was really searching for, being like really clean and pure and interesting. Like a lot of whether it's electronic music or metal, in terms of its composition, it's not necessarily engaging, whereas I like things to be like have depth and layers and to kind of move through it. So even at the start of my journey, I was kind of like looking for these particular things, and then I went over to Germany for a while and just got like super absorbed into the techno scene over there, because like the techno over there is like hectic. Like there's like the birthplace of the style of techno that I really like, that industrial, sometimes really minimal, that vibe that just moves through, and got really into it, especially in that kind of frame of things, and not just the techno, but like all the Anjuna deep style music, which is on the more melodic house sort of spectrum of it. And so I had these like two things kind of coursing through my taste systems, and
Avaxa was born.
Avaxa was born.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So in terms of like mindset, can you tell us a little bit about like the mindset that it takes to be consistently producing music and to be a creative person that you are?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have all the answers in that regard, because like I still, even years on, find myself always coming up to roadblocks. There's always problems that need to be solved. There's always trying to seek that motivation to be able to achieve your dreams and to like continue on with this journey, because at times it can be a really hard journey, and often there's not a lot of support. It's just like it can be really harsh industry at times, but finding the strength to kind of like push forward and continue on can be really difficult at times. But I don't know, you continue on sometimes. Maybe it's kind of a bit self-malicious. You're kind of like beating yourself over this perceived dream or this thing that you're kind of working towards. But
is there anything in particular that keeps you going then?
It is a very rough industry, isn't it? It kind of, just when you get a hold of something you think is a thing, and then something else just like, you're right, bashes you over the head or something. And it's the same with all arts industries though, and that's why it's such an interesting topic, I think, because I know filmmakers and I know music producers and I know all these different people, and they have all these different struggles, and then they're like also trying to push this creative thing, and it's just like so demotivating, but also the thing that keeps them going at the same time. You know what I mean? So.
Well, by the sounds of it, you said that you started learning Ableton on your own. So I'm curious, for people out there who are maybe trying to start off with music production, what kind of advice do you have for starting out? Was there anything that you learned along the process of learning Ableton that you could maybe share with people out there?
I mean, I'm completely self-taught in that regard. Like I, watched a lot of tutorials, got a couple of books, and mostly just through practice of just being in there and just like writing track after track after track, and most of them being shit and never seeing the light of day. But I think in terms of motivation, it's just like kind of having these broader goals and going, I can't quit until I reach these goals, or, I can't stop until I reach these goals. And so, like having like an EP that you're working on, or having some sort of thing that you kind of need to kind of persist with. And, when you're in the software all the time, it's easier to keep that motivation, even if the thing that you're working on isn't necessarily something that will eventually get released. Just being in there and having that project, having that goal of like, it needs to progress, it needs to continue forth. and continually listening to it and going like, this is awesome, but it can be better, and continually doing those revisions and doing those edits and just pushing forth and finishing tracks, because if you continually start tracks, you can get a bit deflated, because you think like I'm not going anywhere, I'm not improving, I'm not releasing anything. But if you're finishing tracks, then you're getting that sense of achievement that can boost you forth to kind of go on to the next thing.
And I'm sure you also learn a lot from those tracks as well when you are constantly going back to the revisions and constantly changing it.
Every time. And even in tracks that you don't finish, even in just that starting phase, you'll still learn things, new techniques of how to, make things better or make things more interesting. And I also try to have sessions of just sound design where I'm just not necessarily focusing on making a track, but just focusing on making interesting sounds and seeing what I can do, and just having allocated time to play with music, especially when you have synthesizers and things, just having that kind of play time so that when you do go down to sit down to make a track, you have these tools in your toolbox so you can kind of pull out and go like, oh, that sample I made last week, I can pull out and it would fit really nicely there. And it kind of like keeps you in this positive mind frame that keeps you going a bit. So yeah.
It's definitely good to have structures in place like that, because often, because producing music as well, like I'll get to a stage where I'm like, I really need this kind of sound, but I'm in the mood of trying to finish the track or in the mood of trying to create synths or whatever. But then there's this other work, which is this other mode to get into to create these different things. But if you've got these foundations for whatever you're doing, be it filmmaking or music production or whatever, if you've done that work like behind, then this part is much easier. But on the other side of that as well, often I find that if you're trying to do this one thing, then sometimes this thing actually bursts out of that as well. Like I'll sit down and just do this 10% of this part, and then next minute you're doing the complete other thing.
You go in this tangent.
Yeah, but that's fine, because you set your goal to do this thing, but then you go, oh, actually this could turn into this really cool thing, and then you have this thing and it just turns into this. You just go on different tangents and stuff, but you can make really cool things doing that, you know what I mean? So you can be not even motivated to do one thing, and you're like, I guess I'll just do this one day, but because you've shown up to do some work, it turns into a masterpiece by accident.
That process of just starting enables you to kind of continue forth, because once you're in there, once you're actually like listening to it and seeing it, it becomes real, and you can kind of get inspired to go on those tangents and make little things. But I think in terms of going into sound design and then having that to pull from is kind of similar to how videographers work, where they go out and film everything and then they take it back and make something out of it, which is, I guess, more similar to what they would do in pop music and things. Like, they'd have like these recording sessions and these songwriting sessions, and they'd mix it all together. But I think the key with production, especially in electronic music, is just using a range of those tools or a range of those methodologies to kind of culminate in a process that works for you, because every producer has their own thing that works for them, and figuring out how your brain works and what your philosophies are like will all combine with these different strategies that you use to build a process that works for you.
Yeah. It's definitely a step-by-step thing as well, because when you set this goal where it's like writing an EP or whatever it is, and it's up here, you don't think about all the tiny steps that it takes to get to that thing. So sometimes you're like, I'm not starting that because I can't even imagine what it's going to take to get there. But if you're like, oh, I want to get there, and this is what it's going to take to get there, and today I'm going to start step 1. And then all of a sudden in 2 months' time you finish that whole thing. But it's because you just laid out the goals of it.
That's it. And it's more manageable for your brain to consume that as well.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. You break it down.
I write so many to-do lists, like so many to-do lists.
some of them.
You're breaking things down, and sometimes like something will be on the top of my to-do list for like so long, and it'll be really important, but I just, as you said, I can't think about it, and so I'll write another to-do list, and there will be like a tiny little portion of it where it's just like, how about just open the image? Like that's on your to-do list. Trying to just motivate yourself however you can, just to like do little bits, because like sometimes you have more capacity than others. Like more often than I would like, I kind of fall into these slumps or these kind of depressive episodes where I don't have the motivation to pull from, but just doing any of those little things to boost me back up and kind of like knock me out of it a bit, so that I can do those little things. So it's like open the image, just like, okay, well, I can do that.
Yeah. Because the brain, I suppose, isn't very inherently lazy, but if you just kind of like whip it a little bit to be like, just do this one thing, shut up, and then you do it, and then it realizes just how easy the thing is. And then you realize that you're actually having a fun time doing it as well.
Yeah,
so like, what am I talking about? Why have I been putting this off? I'm actually having a great time doing this. And you just keep doing it for ages. Like,
And it can just be like a small thing, like you said, just opening the file or having some small sort of inspiration or something that can, I guess, top up your cup. I always like that idea of, you know, even if you have those episodes when you're down, something small that you're passionate about that can kind of invigorate you again. But you've got to, you know, in your mind, it's hard to go, oh, well, I'm going to go and edit a video. I'm going to go and produce a whole track, because in your mind, that's a lot to do. But then the whole idea of breaking it down, I'm sure, stands out to a lot of people, really. It's something that's more manageable.
And a lot of it's habit forming, you know, like when I'm in a bit more of a slump or a bit of like a lazy mind frame, those lazy habits will become my habits, and then I have to re-break those habits. And so by, you know, just kind of like replacing them with better habits and, you know, fighting through, you know, the first few days of building those habits and kind of like persisting on, is like your brain puts up so much resistance to forming like these more active habits as opposed to the lazier ones. But by like just kind of forcing yourself to get into a habit forming mind frame where, like, you know, okay, I'm going to do this every day, you know, like just for this week, I'm just going to do it every day and not question it throughout this week. After this week, I can question it and see if it worked for me. But this week, I'm just going to do it. Because I have a tendency to get very existential or very internal and kind of question my motives at every step of the way. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this career torture for this, you know, seemingly unattainable goal or whatever? But a lot of those thoughts come about when I am in these slumps or I'm in these lazier times, and it's not conducive for me to be thinking these thoughts. You know, I just get in this a more negative headspace that doesn't work for me. And so, yeah, pulling yourself out, giving yourself more positive talk, and forming some more positive habits, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely an artist life thing where you're questioning everything you're doing, and it can be as good as thinking like you're making something, and then that night you're like, you know, this is amazing, and then you wake up and you listen to it again or you watch it again or whatever, and you're like, this is complete trash. What am I doing with my whole life? Who am I? Like, I need to go and do nothing, you know, deactivate my Facebook and jump off a cliff or something, you know, like it gets that way, you know. But, but then if you're like, you know what, maybe I'll just jump in. I'm just in the same thing over and over again. But it's like, I guess it is a really good point to kind of make. Is like, you're right, it's so easy to form these habits then kind of thing. But if you just go, shut up, brain, I'm just going to do this thing for X amount of time. That's a really good like strategy, I think, where it's like, because then you're just like, it's okay, because that's a really easy thing to do. And then that's all I'll do. And then you find yourself in that habit already, and it's just formed, and it's like productive, which is like really good. Because
you can get these lingering questions, you know, whether it's like in your direction in life or the projects that you're currently working on, you get these like big lingering questions, and sometimes you don't have all of the information to answer them. There might be like requiring a lot of thought, and you don't have the time to really answer them in that moment, or it's just not conducive to answer it at the moment. And so I'm a big fan of like reserving my decision making for later, you know, until I have all the information, because our brains are kind of like pre-wired to make instant decisions, you know, make instant judgment calls, or to kind of come back to like questioning whether it's right or not. But by, you know, telling myself that like it's okay to not know what you're doing all the time, it's okay to not have the answers, and so we're going to think about this later. We're going to think about this at X date after we've done a certain activity, or, you know, we've after this gig, you know, we can think about it then. But while we're working towards that gig, let's not think about that, because we've got a job to do. You know, we don't have time to think about this. We've got shit to do.
Yeah. And that sounds like a lot of self-awareness and, I guess, maturity that goes into that, because it would be, I'm sure, quite a common thing for artists, for you guys to keep producing and keep having these internal questions. But that also says something about your values and how important this is to you if you are questioning it, because clearly it is something that's important to you. Otherwise you wouldn't be questioning where you're going and if you're doing the right thing. So yeah, it's really fascinating to have that kind of mindset. I'm curious, do you have any like, where do you kind of seek your inspiration from? Do you have things that you like, artists that you look to, or things that you do in life to continue inspiring yourself?
Yeah, I guess I'm not super good at self-motivating myself, but at some points I will find myself in a situation that I do find inspiring and be like, this is why I'm doing all of these things, and this is why I'm here. Like, especially going out to gigs, and not just the same gigs, the same club nights that I always, go to talk to people or whatever. Like going to like concerts of artists that I really admire. Like, last year I saw Nils Fram, and at the time I was in a really negative headspace, and just coming back from that, like, I went straight back from the concert back home and just produced for like 4 hours, because I was like, this guy, like, he's got it down pat. Like, his compositions are just everything, and like how does he do that? And just kind of pulling myself back and going like, no, like I am on the right track, and I need to go that extra mile to reframe things. And when you're there, you're in the crowd, you're absorbing the performance that's being laid out to you. Your mind's thinking about things. Your mind's like, oh, the way that his chord progressions were in this section, like, that's really interesting, or I should play with, that reminds me, like, I should play with my timing in this track, or various things, or those instruments that he's using, like, I should use more classical instruments. And so
it definitely happens to me a lot. I find myself like halfway through a show of an artist that I love, and whether I'm in a bad headspace about my music or not, or whatever it is, and just like, you're right, it just punches you in the face. You're like, oh my God, this is why I'm doing this. And it literally makes you want to be like, this is cool and everything, but I'm going home now to do this thing. You know what I mean? But it's like, all right, I'll wait until they're finished and then go do that thing. But it's a really good thing. It's a balance kind of thing, because if you lock yourself in the room for 10 hours every day and you're like, I'm going to produce, and then like after 4 days you've made nothing, but then you go out to a show for something that you love, you're like, oh, this is why I'm doing it again. And it kind of, so there's that balance thing where if you only allocate a particular amount of time and you're doing other things with that time, then it's going to be much more productive time. You know what I mean?
And I think just, going out there and, whether it's like seeing other people or collaborating with people, just kind of like going out into the world more. I feel like a lot of artists have a tendency to be very insular and stay at home, because producing by its nature is like a solo activity. And so a lot of artists can get very lonely or isolated at times, because, you might have like all of these people kind of, but none of them, like, you're not working with people day to day. Like, like in the office, if I had problems, I would go to my boss or go to a colleague or whatever, but I don't have a boss. Like, there's no one telling me what to do. And so with that, like the role of a leader or a role of a boss isn't just to tell you what to do, but it's to support and to encourage and to help you be on the track, like being a good leader. And so, I mean, it's hard to find mentors and hard to find people in the industry that are just going to like sit there and support you because they've got their own things to do, So you kind of have to be your own leader. You have to be your own support person. But at the same time, seek out those relationships, seek out those support systems, and know that you're not so alone, even though it may seem like it sometimes.
That's huge. Yeah. Like, I've never thought about that, in that you have to, like, that leader thing, and that's what, like, it's the leader's role to support you, but and you are your own leader. But if you're not supporting yourself, which often it's very hard to have positive thoughts and be like, no, it's okay, you're doing a good thing, and you achieved this today, you know what I mean? More often than not, you're like, you did a shit job today, try again tomorrow. And that's just your brain, and it's trying to help you, but it just so happens to come out in those kind of thoughts, So, but I never thought about it that way, so it's really good.
And that actually says a lot to me about self-care as well within yourself, of trying to balance that, because like you said, if you don't have anyone you're communicating with, or anyone that's like pushing you to create, goals that they're looking for, you're creating your own goals and your own meaning for the process. So I guess in that process, it could be quite easy to lose that self-care or that ability to switch off. But yeah, it's interesting that before you mentioned you had the notes, because I guess that's a form of like having a list of things as a way of being accountable, I guess, or having something to work towards. So I guess that's, by the sounds of it, a way that you keep on track or keep working towards.
And, doing those things that kind of like pull you back into line, but then also having that self-care, like taking time off, which for a long time was like a bit of a foreign concept, because, instead of taking time off, I would just procrastinate because I was burnt out. But instead of, like going and climbing a mountain, or, doing yoga, or doing something that would actually like fill up my soul and care for myself, I would just sit on YouTube and then feel bad about myself because I wasn't working as much as I should. And so you can very easily get into these cycles of procrastinating, feeling bad, and then continuing to not make music. But actually like scheduling my downtime and going, you know, one day a week I'm going to actually like have a day off and go do something that isn't related to the music industry, because like it's so easy to think like, oh, but I just had a weekend. Like, yeah, I was doing like, you know, 2 gigs and then I came home and just like slept all Sunday and then, but you know, like that's a week, that's a weekend. I should be able to now work a full week, but that's like, but you didn't actually have any time off. You know, you just, it's like you were still working on the weekend and now you're working all week and then you're going to go work on the weekend again. So yeah, actually like valuing downtime and how important it is and how much that self-care can enable you to continue work. Because if you're continually burnt out, you're not going to be making a quality product, and you're not going to be feeling good about it.
Yeah, that's massive.
It's the fill up your cup concept.
Yeah.
Dan, fill up your cup, Davis.
Yeah, well, that's it. And that makes me think about the whole concept of, because I've looked into a lot of research about being efficient and trying to, I guess, maximize what you can output without, you know, limiting your cup as such. And one of the big things is you take 50 minutes of work and then you have to have at least 10 minutes to break, right? And this concept is just to allow the brain to reset and to allow, you know, normal processes outside of that focus process to happen so that your brain can kind of form different processes and let the brain relax. And it shows time and time again that it's super beneficial. And you see a lot of these people working their ass off and CEOs working as hard as they can. And to me, it seems counterproductive, because if they worked less and had more focus on recovering, then you would think the product and the outcome would be a lot better, because they're working themselves to the point that, are they even processing right? You know, are their brains functioning? You
can really compare it to exercising and muscles in the body, because the body needs physical rest. Like, you know, we can't ignore it. Like, our bodies actually start hurting, but when our brains start hurting, it's easier to ignore. But, you know, it's a similar principle to like interval training, you know, doing high cardio and then like resting and then high cardio and then resting. Or, you know, any sort of training really. But, you know, just treating our brain more like a muscle and understanding its limitations and working to its strengths.
That's such a big thing, I think, just thinking of the brain in the context of a muscle that you train, because that's essentially what mindfulness and meditation is, right? It's just training, concentration training, right? But because it's such a foreign concept to people, and even people that do exercise, when you kind of mention that concept, they're just like pushed away because they don't know what it is. But if you kind of present it in the concept of it is a muscle, which I get, you know, it kind of is in that way, then it's much easier to actually take that information and understand that it is a muscle, and it's actually more important than your physical muscles, because if you don't have this sorted, then you don't have any of that sorted.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's it.
You're not optimizing that, so
yeah.
And that's why like, yoga can be a really good gateway to meditation, because for a lot of people, they think like, oh, I can take the time to do yoga because that's like, you know, I'm working my physical body. And then they might also feel some of the benefits of meditation, because, you know, often in practices you'll have meditation times or whatever, and they can kind of start to see the benefits of meditation through that yoga practice. So it's a good little gateway for people to kind of get into that mindset and realize the value of some of these things.
Absolutely.
Because for a long time I didn't realize the value. You know, I remember asking, you know, questions, being like, what am I trying to? Am I trying to like reach like a higher self here, or like what am I actually trying to do when I meditate? And I didn't really get many clear answers for a long time. I just had to kind of figure it out, what my own purpose was in regards to meditation and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what's really hard about meditation, I find. So we've got maybe a couple minutes left, and I really wanted to dive into some of your sustainable living habits, but perhaps you can give us a bit of an overview of like what sustainable living habits you have and how they affect your life positively.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is realizing that you can take all of your soft plastics down to Coles and they'll recycle them. That's like, because I don't know, I'm really into recycling, right? Just because like there's so much plastic in the world, like all the plastic that's been created it still exists. And so I've managed between like composting and regular council recycling, and then we have a soft plastics bin that's the same size as our recycling bin. And between the three of those, our actual bin is like so small and like rarely gets taken out, because there's just not much that's put in there, except for like those like, you know, obscure items that actually just you can't recycle or reuse. But, you know, more than that, reducing the amount of plastic that you actually create, you know, like denying fast food packaging or the amount of packaging that can be put in things is huge, especially when you're getting like lots of takeout, like Uber Eats or buying things online. So much packaging. So just kind of like being aware of like how much packaging you're actually creating, and like as the consumer, it is your responsibility. Like, you know, you are creating the demand for that packaging. You know, we can put blame everywhere else. We can put it on governments. We can put it on overseas countries. We can put it on organizations to solve these problems for us. But the responsibility is on us to kind of reduce our impact in every area, and kind of having the self-awareness to filter through each area of our lives and seeing which ones we can kind of improve on, because like it's our lives, we're the only person who can do it.
That's so big, yeah. I'm sure we could do another whole hour on
just recycling such plastics.
Yeah, just every time I see a person with a straw, I mean, like, you know, because I like to use like reusable cups for coffees and stuff when I go out. But like, yeah, just every time I see, I mean, like obviously plastic cups as well, but every person that gets a straw in their drink in a club or whatever, I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like,
but it's also like they just give them to you, like
that as well, yeah.
Like, you know, because I never want a straw. Like, I don't have a reusable straw because I don't use straws. I just drink out of the cup. Like, we've been doing it for centuries, right? Yeah. Like, it's not that hard to just drink out of a cup.
But still
at bars, like, they just give me straws. And because I don't even think, like, I don't want a straw. I've never wanted a straw, but you're giving me a straw. And, like, by the time I'm told, you know, like, it's already in there. And it's like, great. In that sense, I think that businesses, especially bars, should come around to that a bit more and go, like, no one actually needs straws. You know, like, you can request straws. Like, have people request their straws.
Yeah.
You know, don't just be forcing straws onto people.
It also would cost them less because they have to order less straws. Like.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's so much. But in wrapping up, do you have anything potentially, like any quotes that you kind of live by that really help push your life forward? That's a really on-the-spot question, isn't it? But like, whether it's for an artist's life or just life in general, any quotes that you're really drawn to?
Or even a word or a mantra or anything.
Anything about that. we just love that actionable content.
Yeah.
Meta Minds.
Yeah. I don't know. I think for anyone who hasn't like read some of those Cheryl Strayed, she had like this article series, and she wrote a couple of books, but there's this one article that she did in like a series of 100 where she'd like answer kind of questions. And the question was kind of like, what would you tell your past self if you could talk to her now? And she kind of just goes through like everything in this really like beautiful way. I wish I could remember some of the things that she highlighted, because there were things that really like stuck with me for a while. But for anyone who hasn't kind of heard of her, go look it up. But yeah, and then Tim mentioned he gave that beautiful UWA address, which is like a 10-minute video that you can go look up as well, which I would highly recommend if you're stuck or seeking some of that motivation, because he just gives it to you straight up. You know, he's just like, hey, you got to like go start running, or, you know, like go kind of like do some things, or, you know, like release some of your expectations about what you think will happen, or just be micro ambitious. You know, like, don't think about the long term, just do what's in front of you and do it well, and just focus on like that one little task that you're doing today. And just, you know, don't get too existential, just be micro ambitious. But yeah, definitely go look up those two resources that you mentioned, UWA address and Cheryl Strayed. She did a really good article series. The first 50 are crap. The last 50 are like yeah, there's one I call Tiny Beautiful Things. I think it's number 62 or whatever. Yeah, it's real good.
Nice. We might have to pop those in the show notes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Avaxa. I really appreciate it.
It's been great.